Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we are looking at minute 101. We are right in the middle of that very, very American movie thing, which is the lovely suburban house being torn up by gunfire.
And joining us on today's show, we have a returning guest again. This time it is Catch You Later coming back, my derby buddy, for another week with us. Grosse Pointe Blank fan extraordinaire, welcome back.
Thank you. This is so exciting.
Thanks for getting up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good set of minutes, actually. What I realize is these 2 minutes in particular, like today and tomorrow, are all of the most memorable parts of this like whole climax in terms of the gunfighting bit, right? It's the showdown with Grosse, it's the showdown with the NSA agents, and it's no spoilers, but the demise of Grosse in the next minute as well. It is some great lines in this minute as well. I think it's really Dan Aykroyd on top form. But the thing that I noticed right at the top of this minute, which I had not really consciously thought of before until I was watching it just now, is we have a first-person shooter view in this minute. Like, you almost expect the guns to show up at the bottom of the screen as he's approaching Dan Aykroyd, and Dan Aykroyd steps out. It's obviously it's a kind of more likely to be a Doom reference, but in my mind it reminds me so much of Time Crisis, where you're in a situation and it's a on the rails shooter, and all of a sudden a bad guy steps out from behind something and just starts blasting at you.
I think, God,
it's just I'm not sure it really works. Honestly, it seems a little awkward with the stepping and the camera view, but they only do it for a brief second, and it's fun to be seeing that kind of experimentation with the film in this moment, because as we've kind of mentioned before, generally speaking, George Armitage doesn't put much flair into his movies. He's much more of a kind of jobbing director. It's the fairly staple views and perspectives that you tend to see in his work.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think that's partly a function of when this is getting made, who's making it, who's in it. Not least the whole idea that you've got Cusack, we've already got a Doom nod earlier on, and I also feel like this is also something that's already been done with kind of various uses of camera tracking in Hong Kong, notably in John Woo films. But there's been a bunch of experiments with different ways of putting you in either the bullet's path or the shooter's path, both as a victim and also as the firer. And that influenced the video games, which has then influenced, it's this chain of events, and here we are. And as you say, it's slowly creeping into American film at this point, and I think it's kind of interesting. I think some of that will often come from the stuntmen, because of working with the cameras and where to put them, and it's sometimes, we're not quite yet at the whole Paul Greengrass. We discussed on previous episodes the whole business of when shaky cam finally does turn up. But there's definitely experiments with steady cam in action at various points, and there's all these attempts to make the audience unsettled. I mean, Ridley Scott's kind of an interesting one with that, because before Saving Private Ryan, if you look at his films after the more static nature of like his 80s films and Thelma and Louise after that, he starts experimenting, and he's trying to, the shootout at the end of G.I. Jane and the shootout at the beginning of Hannibal, he's trying to do something with the camera that no one's actually figured out how to do, how to create this sense of being there and things are moving. And then Saving Private Ryan comes along and he's like, oh, that's what I should do. Oh, right. And then you get Black Hawk Down, which is insane for its immersion level as a film, like, regardless of what one thinks of it. So I feel like this is, as you say, it's a little thing. It doesn't necessarily work here, but it's nice to see it because we're on the way.
Yeah,
and we'll get more traction later.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this before, right? But they're obviously shooting in a real house, right? We see elements of the house play out around things. I'm pretty sure that if you it's actually the same house that we see from the outside, and if we looked at the two, we could probably map the geometries fairly well.
True.
But the result is very definitely that there are a lot of tight angles. There's a lot of awkwardness for the camera to fit in, right? We saw that a little bit with that camera angle of Debbie coming down the stairs when Martin and Bart first return to the house. You know, that super low angle, and then the kind of awkwardness as the cameraman's clearly standing up to get into a close-up of the group. And I think that plays into this a little bit as well. There was clearly no space for you to see Martin running down the stairs as Gross is firing at him. There was no angle that was you were going to capture that whole field. And so, you know, definitely some elements of like working around the limitations of the field, but it works well enough, I feel. And as you know, it's such a small clip. It's not the biggest issue to have to sit through it. I think we see the kind of hazards of first person shooter camera views with Doom movie much later than this.
I mean, you know, there's the one sequence in it, and people in the Doom adaptation, and people either love it or hate it, right? As a film, and then that sequence, and it's like people who love the sequence tend to hate the film, and vice, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. You have to have that sequence when you're doing a film adaptation of Doom, right? Like, it is such a big part of what Doom is. You can't avoid it, but does it work dramatically? Maybe not so much.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot about Doom, but I remember the first person part.
Yeah,
that's the part. That's why I watched it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's the whole point of that scene, right? Like, it's just
It was exciting when it happened too, that they were doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? You kind of, what is the point of doing that, right? Like, as you say, if you're adapting a game that's famous for it, fine, but it's a gimmick that goes back to, like, you know, early 3D, and like they've experimented with over the hundreds of years or plus of cinema. You know, Hollywood's done film noir like that. They did Mickey Spillane like that. You know, they've always done the point of view thing, and it's always seen as a gimmick because you're sat in the cinema for 2 hours or 90 minutes or whatever, trying to, you know, having this happen, and you can't go anywhere, and it's kind of, you have no control over it. At least in the video game format, it makes sense because it's you. You know, puts you in the game, and it's you doing it, not just your character. Whereas film is built on something different, you know, where you're not in charge. And I feel like combat scenes are an interesting thing because it doesn't all, like, you see it in the boxing movies, you know, where they try and move the camera around and the guy's going like this, you know, and like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Does it really put you there? I don't know anymore. Like when I was younger, I used to get annoyed by it because I like to see the wide shot. I like to see these, you know.
It is about the loss of control, right? It's about the claustrophobia, because normally in cinema, to a large extent, you're trying to remove the concept of there being a camera from the narrative.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is suddenly all about the camera, but not just is it all about the camera, it's narrowing your field of view in a way that's very realistic, but unlike video games, it's not giving you control over that camera, right? So you can't choose where that focus is, which becomes frustrating really quite quickly, right? You know, and especially as you try and do the immersion things, you hear things move around, you know, behind you and stuff, and you can't see them. And it's the kind of tension that you often get in like roller coaster rides and theme parks is they'll often have that very narrow field of view, but where, you know, you can turn your head, but you're not going to see anything else because you're in that, you know, that cabin or that window of viewing, and everything else is completely dark.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But I think then that maybe is part of the reason. And then, but as you said, there's also the physical situation. There's also the set / actual location. There's all these other things, and I feel like also it's a budgetary thing as well. Like, oh, you know, we can shoot part of this scene, but actually, why don't we just make it look like the characters behind the camera? I mean, the whole thing about the camera being invisible is one of those weird ones where pre-Kubrick, you could argue maybe that was the case. And then once you get, the auteur of auteurs going, look what I can do, post Orson Welles, who was also going, look what I can do with the camera. Look at it. Look at it. You kind of go,
Yeah.
okay. I think there's kind of different schools of thought on that now, right? I feel like some
I mean,
people like to have their films be, blatant about. I mean, I think I'm one of them. I like to see placement, and I like to know where the camera's putting me to see things because I'm there for spectacle.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think it's Saving Private Ryan, right, with the Normandy beach landing, where it's just like a like minute long or something single camera shot where
it's
you're very conscious
stupidly long.
of it being a camera. And the thing is that's fine. You can do that. You can call out that this is a camera shot as long as you do it well. But you have to
Yeah,
do
of
it well.
course.
If you are just doing a jobbing, work with the camera where, it's a fixed camera or it's maybe very basic Steadicam or something like that, where you're not really drawing attention to the camera, there's a lot less risk. There's a lot less on the line for that. You can just,
Yeah.
Go as you go, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole argument people use about television versus, like, back when television was done more cheaply, about television versus film, right? That was the argument everyone made was, well, it's just a locked off camera sitting still.
Yeah.
People are just walking in and out of it. And which is ironic because you go back and look at very early black and white, even when they were doing what little live TV we have recordings of, it's actually quite surprising how often they move the camera because they're in the studio and they know they're not in the theater. And so while they're doing it live like it's theater, there's a lot of stuff happening to keep the audience interested and to keep your sense of which character you should be looking at and what's going on. And then you get into the early 60s where they're starting to record it on film and edit it on film rather than live. But again, I've seen stuff from that era that surprises me with the camera movements. There's a couple of Doctor Who's, which are obviously done on a tiny budget, done in the studio. There's a couple of long tracks in, pushing the camera in on certain things that is done at a speed to kind of get you scared and up your tension, in a really modern way. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, okay, so this has always been a thing. Probably, if I tracked it back far enough, we'd probably get to the silent era because pretty much everything starts like the grammar of film is done right from the start. Like they figure it out straight away, and then they're like, just use it. But I agree with you that I think there's it has to be done well. It has to be done by somebody who actually understands why you're doing it. I find it interesting when you meet people who do it because it's the cool thing they saw in the last film they looked at, so they put it in their film.
Yeah,
right. It's like the statement. Oh God, what's his name? There's a film director who remade a science fiction film that is considered a classic, even though it's very 80s. He made a modern version. He was recently asked about that in relation to that and another film he was doing about, doing cityscapes and action with big cityscapes a la Metropolis. And he was like, never seen it. And you're like, okay, you've never seen Metropolis. Okay, like, what do you say there, right? The guy's got it third hand via Blade Runner and anything else he has seen.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we have to dismiss his ability to make films, but it is interesting that when he asks a cameraman for this or that, or he asks the set design for this or that, they know what he's talking about? Are they do they have the same references? Are they capable of having that sense of actually what we're drawing from is this historical? Like, I feel like that's the thing that starts to go bit by bit as we go through generations of filmmakers, right? I feel like they have their interests, and that's great because they want to, that's what gets them into film. But I often look at a film and I'm like, you've clearly never seen film X, because if you did, you wouldn't do this, or you wouldn't know that, or you would have done this differently. Because you've just reinvented the wheel, and actually you could have done something original. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being snobbish. I'm not sure.
So, I mean, the other element of this, right, is that we've also moved into a new form of, quote unquote, filmmaking beyond film and TV, right, which is the content creator self-creation of Twitch and YouTube and Snapchat and TikTok, and there, I mean, especially with, more particularly YouTube, I think, with the longer format and the ability to edit, right, which none of the other platforms really have in quite the same way.
Mm.
Have this desire to have interesting camera shots with a single camera, right? And
Yeah.
frequently a lot of pressure to have rapid turnaround. You know, you're not able to take 6 months to produce a video and make any money off of it, right? You're creating
Yeah.
a video a week, right? At least
Yeah.
to keep up with the demands. But you
A
frequently
lot like old television.
right, and it has a lot of those same hallmarks. So, but with better editing tools available to you, right? So now what you do is you want to keep the viewer engaged. You don't want a completely static camera. What do? Well, you arbitrarily just keep zooming in at various points in the thing, and it's the same shot. But what you've done is in post, you've cut it, you've zoomed this section of it, you cut it, and it screams, "This is a camera." In
Yes.
I think like the most unpleasantly obnoxious way, but it's just become a staple of the format now because it is the thing that works to give that dynamism in the camera work that you cannot get from a single camera at a single point without reshooting everything, so that you're just talking to one camera here and then you've got another camera at your 3/4 angle coming in at you and you have to re-record everything again as close as possible. You don't have the time for that. You know, you don't have dialogues where each person gets a focal camera unless it's a big enough YouTube channel that they can afford to run 3-4 cameras at a time.
That's not super common.
It's really, it's not. It's starting to happen. You know, there are definitely some channels that have kind of gotten to that level and have chosen to go down that professional route as well, right? Because there is a choice there. There are some major channels that have just, they don't feel like they need to do that. Even if they've got a whole team and camera work and they do all the editing, they're still running one camera, right? And they may invest in a camera and a cameraman so that they can get some, you know, steady cam footage or some moving footage or some, you know, real-time zooms and so on. But then you're much more likely to invest in the editors to actually edit the stuff faster, because that takes way more time. But then you've got things like, I mean, the one that always comes to my mind is Sorted Foods, where they are running 2-3 cameras. They are cutting between talking heads. They are doing the close-ups on the presenters. And it is a much more slick, almost modern day TV level of production quality.
Yeah, I mean, while we've got there a lot quicker, it's definitely been the journey with YouTube and content and first person content generally. You know, it's definitely been that journey to get to where we already were. As with a lot of things in the digital sphere, we just, you know, it's like we end up just, you know, going background again.
And with a fundamentally different audience as well, because, you know, the creation is much more attuned to a high turnover, short attention span, endless demand for more content, which I don't think TV was ever really subjected to, because it was always subject to the limitations of the number of channels and the amount of airwave time.
I mean, to begin with, I mean, once advertising stepped in at least in British TV, that definitely changed the need for not just content, but that's when they first started thinking about, you know, being on air for longer than just the usual hours of the day, you know, and then there's more time, you can sell more ad time and more air time.
Right. It wasn't the same infinite competition, right? It wasn't, you know, you can create, like, I mean, if you could basically Bruce Almighty it, right? Every content creator could Bruce Almighty it and have 24-hour live running content, and people would still say, well, why aren't you producing more content? Because that's the nature of the internet.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how many are leaving at the moment or cutting back or
I mean, the churn has always been there, right? Epic Mealtimes being a very early example of this, with just, you know, you keep getting bigger until at some point you can't really do that, and you hemorrhage viewers, and you know, things go sideways and everything implodes, and there's nothing left afterwards, right? Because these are not fixed seasons in the way that it was originally created. It is the constant demand. You have to be fresh and creative and new and innovative every single week, regardless of how you're feeling, regardless of anything else, because if you don't, you're going to lose viewers, you're going to lose the algorithm, you are going to be done. Like, you have no choice but to do this every week.
Will the creators ever be free?
They need a union. They obviously just need a union. That seems like the only way to do that.
I agreed, but they don't strike me as the sort of people to unionize. I think they're like cats, right? You can't hurt them.
But you can spend a whole day doing it. You know?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. I'm pro union. You know, I'd say they do that, but you meet actual content creators, and you're kind of like, very few of them think that way.
So speaking of unions, we have this last pick from Dan Aykroyd. Now, there was an interesting question raised, I think last week, maybe the week before. Is this a sincere offer?
Oh.
No.
As in, does he mean it? Was he just trying to buy time?
Right. Because I always thought of it as being sincere. Like,
so did I.
I just thought, you know, Martin is a very, very effective hitman. Like, I want him in the union. But at the same time, like, Martin's been pretty emphatic and categoric in saying no. And is he just buying time? Is he just taunting him? Like, I think he kind of knows that he's, you know, Martin's not going to go upstairs and just kill his, you know, girlfriend's father. Like, that's not a way to want to start.
I mean, the thing that makes me increasingly agree with this assessment of it is the fact that he has spent the entire film trying to get him killed. Like, the whole conversation with the NSA agents in the toilet at the club.
Yeah.
It's like, why haven't you guys offed him already? It's like, he's more interested in the job than he is in Martin.
I think there's still some sincerity in the diner.
Yeah. No, there is, but yeah.
But by this point, I think it's done, right? Like, he, you know, when he does that hard exit with expletive laden hard exit at the diner, I think that's the point where it's done, right? Like, at this point, he's just like buying time, winding Martin up, like kind of taunting him a little bit, right? Also, given how many people he's just lost, I'm not sure there's much of a union left, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think the union might have been a bust. I think Martin has done a full-on Pinkertons and just completely blown up the union at this point.
Yeah, that's true. I think there is.
Except for the Butch Filipino ladies. I think they're still around. I hope they're still around. Damn, I still want to see that sequel.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is one of the things, isn't it? Is it really, you know, in the end, does it matter if it's genuine? Because he's been at loggerheads all film, and he's been another obstacle, and he's put all these obstacles in Martin's way. I mean, you know, there's something to be said as well, talking about what we were saying about the content creators and whether or not they're the sort of people to unionize in the first place. You know, are there meetings? Then no. You know, that's just the attitude of so many people I know who will moan and moan and moan about management and the structure they're under and the people they work with. And then when you suggest organization, they're like, well, okay, but they want someone else to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to be part of it. The notion that that teamwork is genuinely something that means teamwork is just, they don't like it. They just they want relatively easy solutions, sadly, some people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I will be interested to see quite how, you know what I mean? I'd love to see all of that change one day, but right now I feel like this film captures a very particular moment in the zeitgeist. And I feel like that moment has, in a weird way, we've said this before about the film, there are parts of the film that feel actually ahead of its time.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's another generation after Martin who are now very much into getting unionized. I think that's where it's happening.
Yeah,
I think the Martins of this world are actually kind of slightly stuck trying to figure out how to manage and herd the cats, but they never wanted to be management. They just happened to have got bumped upstairs because they're still in the job.
Yeah. Watching this minute now, having discussed last week, you know, the where the squibs are going off, where the bullet holes are being placed, it's increasingly painfully obvious that it's door jambs, it's door frames, and it's furnishing. It's anything that's like easily fixable and replaceable. And it's kind of, it's kind of hilarious. Now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it, and it's really, really, really obvious.
Did you see the fruit in the fruit bowl that's
Yeah,
shot?
yeah, yeah. But none of the walls ever get touched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm okay with that. It's actually punching above its weight for an indie film. This is
Yeah,
a relatively big gunfight with a lot of squibs getting fired and a lot of action, and it moves. We were saying the other week about how fast this climax is, and
yeah,
the gunfight itself is a pretty damn fast climax. Like you said, you've only just noticed this because we're digging into it.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it is very well done, and it keeps the pace up. And I think this is where, I remember when I was younger, I always wanted to see the longer director's cut of every film.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those instances where you learn actually a lot of the time that quick editing is there for a reason, and it helps. Like if you'd made this a 15-minute fight sequence, that would really start to show. You would be feeling it, you'd be noticing it, it would feel awkward, it would feel budgeted. But because it's paced and it happens over like 5 minutes, if that, it keeps the tempo keeps going, it keeps moving. And even that 5 minutes is interspersed with dialogue sequences with Debbie and Bart, and even to a lesser extent with the kind of the back and forth over the kitchen counter that we have in this minute. It's not all action all the time. It's not a John Woo movie.
Although it's close enough. Like, the whole roll over the countertop and how close they are to each other when they're firing and missing, which is one of those signature Woo things, which I've always loved about his films is the insanity of, firing when you're that close to someone and somehow missing them. And the only thing that's more insane than that is watching everyone else trying to imitate that and get stupider and nuttier. There's a scene at the end of John Badham's is it Terminal Velocity, Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, where the shootout at the end is him and this other guy, and they're both still wearing their skin tight jumpsuits from having parachuted in, right? And they're fighting in an office, so the only thing between them is a desk, and somehow they're missing each other. And it's one of the most ludicrous versions of that I have ever seen. At least this one makes it clear that, and this may be because of the advantage of using a real house rather than a set, is when he shoots over the countertop's broad enough that actually he can't raise his hand high enough to bend the gun down. He's literally just making sure that he keeps Gross's head down. That's all. He fires off 2 shots at a straight line to make sure he keeps his head down. He's not actually trying to hit him.
Yeah.
And I find that much more, by comparison, that's more logical and reasonable.
Yeah.
But that said, of course, we keep saying this is one of the fun things about this film is there's all these moments of logic in a film that is, frequently off its rocker.
Right. I mean, it does do sensible at the important times. I feel like we've
at what it thinks is the important times.
Well, yeah, I mean, enough to keep the audience from feeling like it's jumped the shark at any rate.
That's true. Well, you and I think that, and we found people to join us who think that. But true. I still think there's some people out there. Oh, there's definitely people out there who don't get this film like any of us do, and you kind of and I think it's little things like that are why.
Yeah. We also have in this minute the demise of K-Tob Freeman and Hank Azaria here, sadly. And I think this is something we've both lamented in past episodes, is that it feels like a bit of a weak ending for those two characters.
Yeah, it does. It feels like the kill off that they show. Yeah.
And
they did a lot of work. I mean, they're in the whole thing to end like that, but
they provide a kind of counterpoint to these other two characters, right? This is the 3 of the 4 big aspects of this world, right? You've got the kind of terrorist gun for hire with no morals that is Benny Urquidez, Felix La Poubelle, and Felix has already been dispatched. But then you've got these 3 groups, right? You've got the government killers, you've got the kind of unethical ex-government killer, and then you've got the quote-unquote ethical ex-government killer, all kind of facing off. And interestingly, in this universe, the ethical ex-government killer is the one that wins, whereas I think we both agree that in the real world it ended up being the unethical ex-government killers in the form of privatized military. But here we are.
Yeah. I mean, but it is, this the two characters get short shrift, but there's two things I do like about the way they leave, despite everything. We could have had so much more time with them earlier on. It would have been nice to have seen them talking to each other before they opened the doors. That would have been really funny if we cut from Martin and Grosse talking to each other to them talking to each other, because that's the reflection, right? Is these two guys who work together and get on with each other and understand each other, even if they're both twisted in weird different ways. And these two guys who are like that, but refuse to work. Well, one of them refuses to work with the other. And it would be nice to have switched back to these two guys outside making some witty dialogue. And then they go, ready, pull the thing, step in, and then bam, they're gone. That would have been so much funnier. And actually, I do lament that. But as it stands, the whole open the door and get shot thing is a trope of these kind of shootouts, particularly in Hong Kong films. And I love the fact that we not only, unlike the other nameless stunt guys, we can see exactly who it is. We know who they are. They hold themselves like government agents. There's no bad posture and stupid handling of the gun. And it's an interesting moment for just 1 second to unite the two the two contract killers, right? Yeah. Because this is just how ruthless and how amoral Grosse is. Yeah. Is that now that they're going to be no use to him, given where they are and what they're doing, the enjoyment on his face as he shoots them.
Yeah.
Absolute glee. Yeah.
Right? And he is so overjoyed to be emptying all his weapons at them. Like, it's the perfect moment to turn and just take a shot at Martin, and he doesn't. He loses his opportunity to do that because it's like, I'm gonna enjoy killing you guys. Although I do think it's funny that Aykroyd obviously is not used to shooting because he blinks with every single shot. Which I've never noticed before today. But it's literally Cusack's obviously practiced enough to keep his eyes open while the gun goes off, but it is kind of funny to see. It is a glorious thing.
It's interesting that you say about them, like, talking outside or something like that. I'm not sure it slows the tempo of the movie. It would break with the action. I almost wish that we saw them as the car chase was happening, the quote unquote car chase. And we saw them spectating what was happening with this chase down the street.
That would have been funny.
Very funny. I'm thinking in my head of the Fifth Element moment when the cops are ordering McDonald's and the car chase blitzes by and he crushes his soda and goes, whoa.
Which again is a trope.
But at the same time, I feel like what they've achieved here is a real element of surprise. When you're first watching this movie, there is no expectation. It's been so long since these characters have really featured. It was before the start of the school reunion, the last time we saw these guys, right? It's been so long that you're not, as a viewer, you're not even thinking about, I wonder where those guys are.
Yeah.
But of course, that only works the first time you watch it, and for us, we know this moment is coming. So
I don't remember. I've lost count now. First time was so long ago.
Well, what I realized is because I'm watching this on loop whilst we record these episodes, I'm seeing it at least like 16, 17 times.
At a
minute.
Yeah.
So I've just racked up the number of times I've watched this film all the way through 16 or 17.
Yeah, I'm definitely breaking my record for most number of short-term consecutive views, which is 24 times watching The Matrix in 2 weeks.
Wow.
But the fact is that I'm still not tired of the film. I still enjoy watching it every time I see it. And I think Grosse Pointe Blank is doing the same thing. I think this is a testament to these kinds of films at this point in time, 97 to 99, what's in the air, the kind of people making them, the way they want to make them. These are people with clear visions and clear ideas with some experience in either in creative industries, be it film, be it comic books, be it what music, and they're bringing everything together, and they see cinema as a total experience. The music, the editing, the sound design, the production design, everything is part of it, you know. In that sense, I suspect Cusack has far more in common than most people would probably consider with the Wachowski sisters.
Yeah. Anybody else got anything else for this minute?
This is terrible. I keep wondering why they couldn't just shoot through the island. I mean, it wouldn't make the movie as interesting.
Oh,
wouldn't have the ending. But
point.
I think given how
would 9 mils go through it?
Yeah, you can see it on the reverse shot. There's a load of stuff in those, like presumably saucepans and things.
Okay.
So you definitely could, and the ultimate reason why they didn't do it is because they didn't want to have to pay to replace that kitchen island.
Well, you wouldn't get all that.
But you also wouldn't get all of the over-the-top stuff.
The fun stuff.
I mean, yeah.
They're just not the most efficient, is I think what I'm saying.
I think that's fair. I think especially here, Martin could very easily have just like shot straight through the counter into Grosse.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But then this is it, isn't it? This scene is really not about these two. Yeah, this is about them, sorry, not everyone else. This is all about Martin's relationships, you know. Father figure here, you know, girlfriend figure upstairs, etc., etc., etc.
Right. And also you're basically condensing the comic stalemate in a gunfight to a kitchen island, right? Like it's kind of that reduction. It's not like opposite sides of the battlefield or something like that, or like, you know, the kind of the showdown in the western town where like the good guys and the bad guys are on opposite sides of town hiding behind wagons or whatever. It's all of that, but just condensed down to a single kitchen island.
Yeah, which, as we know, is ludicrous. Hence why it's so much fun to see in these films. You know, at least with John Woo, you know, the characters are all over the place, and they usually end up sliding or falling into the places. You know what I mean? The gamesmanship of how he choreographs these things, you know, is that they are in the middle of being shot at, often by other people as well, and it's like they happen to end up, you know. Yeah. Whereas everybody who does it afterwards is kind of like, just let's be honest, they're just taking the mick really with it because they're looking for any object to use as the bit in the center, and that's
right.
Yeah, that's not necessarily thought of practically in the context, is it? Okay, this was minute 101 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers Dev Soligar and Hugh David.
Today's guest, once again, was Catch You Later, GBP fan extraordinaire.
Good job.
You can find them at, where can we find you?
North Bay Derby, where I was yesterday big time. Also, Cacciatore Reviews.
Ooh, yeah. There we go.
Okay. Little movie review situation.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
You can find us at all good podcast players, as well as YouTube, X, and Spotify, and pretty much everywhere we are at Debi Radio, or on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio.
And finally, if you want to come and talk with us, come find us over at the Facebook listeners group, which is Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. One more time, that is DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't done